She was about to exit the ball when the Duke's mother held her hand and told her, "Stay close to him." Music drifted through the room like a delicate spell, and laughter echoed softly against the high ceilings. Guests wore masks of gold and silver, glittering like stars trapped in the vast darkness of the palace. It was a night of celebration, yet beneath the surface, whispers of curses and secrets clung to the walls like cobwebs. Lady Aloan stood near the edge of the ballroom, her gown a deep emerald green that seemed almost to drink in the dim light. She had arrived with the intention of staying only a short while, attending out of courtesy to her family and the court. Her heart, however, was unsettled. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of watchful eyes that went beyond mere noble observation. She had caught glimpses of the Duke of Ashbourne throughout the evening. He was nothing like the lively gentleman who danced and flirted carelessly across the floor. He moved with a quiet grace, his dark eyes sweeping the hall, calm yet sharp, as if he could see through every mask and lie in the room. Guests gave him space, almost instinctively, a mix of respect and fear keeping them at bay. Aloan adjusted her mask, a delicate thing of lace and silver, and took a step toward the grand doors. She was about to leave the hall entirely when a gentle hand rested on hers. She turned sharply, surprised, and found herself looking into the eyes of a woman who seemed to hold the weight of centuries in her gaze, the Duke's mother. "Stay close to him," the woman whispered, her voice a soft melody that carried both command and warning. Aloan's breath caught. I don't understand," she said, unsure whether the Duchess meant the Duke or something else entirely. The woman's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and yet her hand remained firm. "It is not only for your sake," she said, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. "And it is not only for his. Some paths can only be walked together." Before Aloan could respond, the Duchess withdrew her hand, disappearing into the throng of guests as silently as she had appeared. Aloan's mind raced. What could this mean? Why would the Duchess, a woman she barely knew, instruct her to stay near the Duke? Her curiosity tugged her forward. She turned her gaze toward him. The Duke stood by a towering window, his silhouette outlined by the moonlight spilling over the blackened cliffs beyond the palace. For a moment he seemed almost unreal, a figure carved from shadow and silver, and Aloan felt an inexplicable pull toward him. Gathering her courage, she made her way across the marble floor, her steps measured and quiet. Each stride seemed to draw her closer not only to him, but to a destiny she had not known awaited her. The Duke did not turn as she approached, yet somehow she felt his awareness like a weight upon her chest. "Lady Aloan," he said at last, his voice low and measured. When he finally turned, his dark eyes met hers, and she felt as if he were seeing every thought, every fear, and every hidden desire she had ever held. "You are far from your family," he continued, though it was not a question but a statement. There was no malice in his tone, only observation, as if noting the truth of the world rather than seeking to accuse her. "I was about to leave," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The music, the masks, it all feels like a dream I don't belong in." He tilted his head, a gesture so subtle it might have been missed, yet it carried something intense and unreadable. "And yet you did not leave," he said. "Curiosity can be dangerous here, Lady Aloan. Some who wander too far never return the same." A shiver ran down her spine, and not entirely from fear. There was an allure in his words, a magnetic pull toward the darkness he carried. She found herself both wary and irresistibly drawn. Before she could answer, a distant sound, a muffled cry, or perhaps the echo of a dropped goblet, broke the spell. The Duke's eyes darkened and he stepped closer, just enough for her to feel the faintest warmth of his presence. "You must be careful," he murmured. "Not everyone here is as they appear. Some masks hide more than simple faces." Aloan nodded, though her mind spun. She did not know what to say, nor did she wish to leave the safety of her own thoughts. Instead, she allowed herself a quiet moment to study him. His features were sharp yet strangely gentle, and she noticed the faintest hint of something unusual, perhaps a shadow under his eyes, a pallor to his skin, as though he carried a weight invisible to the world. The music swelled again, and the dancers' feet echoed like whispers across the floor. Guests twirled and spun, their laughter ringing hollowly in the large hall. Aloan felt like an intruder in a world she did not understand, yet somehow, in the presence of the Duke, the strange heaviness of the palace felt lighter. He took a step back, breaking the unspoken connection between them. "I have duties to attend to," he said, his voice almost regretful, though there was no sign of apology in his tone. He turned, and she watched as he disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by shadows and masked faces. Aloan's heart ached in a way she did not expect. A part of her longed to follow him, to understand him, to uncover the secret that hung over him like a shroud. And yet another part of her whispered caution. There was a reason the Duchess had warned her. Shaking herself from her reverie, she stepped toward the balcony, craving the chill night air. Outside, the wind swept over the cliffs, carrying the scent of the dark sea below. The waves crashed against the rocks with a sound both fierce and lonely. She pressed her hands to the cold stone, her mind still occupied with the Duke. And then she felt it. A presence behind her, not a shadow cast by the moon, but a sense of being watched, felt known. She turned quickly, half expecting to see him there. The balcony was empty, and yet the hairs on her neck stood on end. The feeling of his gaze lingered, cold and intimate at once, brushing against her skin like the whisper of a secret. Aloan wrapped her cloak tighter around her shoulders and leaned over the railing, peering into the darkness below. It was as if the night itself had eyes, and somewhere in that darkness, the Duke watched, waiting, uncertain. Her chest tightened with longing and fear in equal measure. She did not know how long she remained on the balcony, lost in thought. Time seemed to stretch and bend in the grand palace, where candlelight flickered and shadows danced like spirits. When she finally turned to re-enter the ballroom, she paused at the threshold, glancing back at the open balcony, half expecting to see him standing there, silent and enigmatic. But he was not there. A slow, deliberate exhale escaped her lips. She could not deny the pull she felt toward him, a magnetic force she could neither name nor resist. The Duchess's words repeated themselves in her mind, "Stay close to him." But why? Was it for her safety or his? Or something else entirely, something hidden beneath layers of power and fear? The orchestra struck up a new tune, dark and sweeping, carrying with it the promise of something dangerous and beautiful. Aloan found herself drifting toward the center of the ballroom, where masks and mirrors reflected the dim light, the shadows shifting as though alive. Every movement, every glance, seemed charged with meaning, every whispered word a potential threat or invitation. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him again. The Duke of Ashbourne standing across the room, motionless yet commanding attention without effort. His eyes met hers, and for a single heartbeat, the noise, the laughter, the music, all of it, faded into nothing. It was not attraction in the ordinary sense. It was something deeper, something dangerous and profound. It was the acknowledgement of loneliness, of pain, of secrets too heavy to share, and yet somehow it was an invitation. Aloan felt a pull in her chest, a longing that was both terrifying and inevitable. She took a slow, deliberate step toward him, unsure of what she hoped to find. And as she did, a servant brushed past, dropping a small tray of glasses that tumbled to the floor with a sharp, crystalline clatter. The Duke's eyes flared, intense and unreadable, and for a moment it seemed as though the world held its breath. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned away, slipping into the shadows once more, leaving her alone in the golden haze of the ballroom. Aloan's heart raced. Questions flooded her mind. Who was this man? Why did the Duchess insist she stay close to him? And most importantly, what did it mean that her chest ached for someone she had only just met? She pressed her hands to her mask, steadying her breath. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, she felt a presence lingering, watching, waiting. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that this night, this single night, was only the beginning. The candle flames flickered once more, casting long, wavering shadows across the marble floor. And in the heart of Ashbourne Palace, where secrets whispered from every gilded corner, Lady Aloin realized that she had already begun to step into a world she could never leave, not if she wanted to. The Duke's mother's words echoed in her mind, soft and ominous. Stay close to him. And with that, the first thread of fate wove itself around her heart. The morning after the ball, Ashbourne Palace seemed different to Lady Aloin. The golden chandeliers no longer sparkled with warmth, and the corridors felt colder, as if the very stones had absorbed the whispers and shadows of the previous night. Sunlight spilled weakly through the tall windows, casting pale lines across the marble floor. Aloin had received an unexpected invitation that very morning, a note written in careful, looping script. It bore the seal of the Duke himself, a black crest with a silver raven in flight. Lady Aloin, your presence is requested at the estate today. There are matters I wish to discuss privately. Her heart pounded as she read the words. She did not know why he wanted to see her, yet she could not deny the magnetic pull that had drawn her toward him the night before. Despite a sense of unease, curiosity won over caution. The journey to the Duke's estate was silent and somber. Aloin's carriage passed through dense forests where mist clung to twisted branches, making the trees appear as if they were whispering secrets. The road wound sharply over cliffs that plunged into a stormy sea, the waves crashing far below like the roar of ancient beasts. Even the birds in the trees seemed silent, as though they, too, were aware of the darkness surrounding Ashbourne. When the carriage finally arrived, the estate loomed before her like a fortress of shadow and stone. Towers rose high into the sky, their tips lost in drifting clouds. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood, damp stone, and something faintly metallic, as if the building itself held the memory of 1,000 storms. Aloin stepped inside, her shoes echoing softly against the polished floors. The hallways were vast, lined with portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. She had heard whispers of the Duke's family, stories of wealth, power, and curses, but nothing had prepared her for the atmosphere of quiet dread that filled the air. The Duke awaited her in a room overlooking the estate's hidden gardens. The windows were tall and arched, letting in pale light that danced across the floor. He stood near the center, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. "Lady Aloin," he said, his voice low and steady. "Thank you for coming." "You asked me," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. I came." He nodded once, as though that simple gesture confirmed something he had long feared. Then he motioned toward a chair, though he did not sit himself. "Do you know why you were truly invited here?" Aloin hesitated. I do not." His dark eyes studied her for a long moment. "You are curious about me, about my life, about what lies beneath this title." "Yes," she admitted softly. I felt something last night. Something I cannot explain, and I think I want to understand." A flicker of emotion passed across his face, something softer, almost human, before the usual shadow returned. He walked slowly toward a small table where an ancient book lay open. Its pages were yellowed, the ink faded but legible. "This is the Chronicle of Ashbourne," he said. "It tells the story of my family and the curse that has been passed down for generations." Aloin leaned forward, her curiosity overcoming any lingering fear. "A curse," he nodded. "A curse placed upon my ancestors long ago. It binds me to this estate and to this bloodline. I cannot leave freely and I cannot love without danger. Those I care for, they are at risk simply by being near me." Her breath caught. "Then, that is why your mother warned me." "Yes," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "She knew what would draw you closer, even against your better judgment. She knows that the heart can be as dangerous as the curse itself. Aloan felt a pang of sympathy mixed with fear. To love someone like this, to risk everything simply because of the pull of the heart, it was a choice she was not yet ready to make. The Duke moved toward the window, his gaze lost in the gardens below. "I have spent my life in control," he said. "Control over my power, over my actions, over my emotions. But the curse, it tests even that. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and those I love could be taken from me." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "And yet, you did not leave last night. You did not hide from me. You spoke to me, even when it must have been dangerous." He turned to face her fully then, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "I cannot stay away," he admitted, "no matter how much I try, and now you have come here. You have stepped into this world and perhaps into my life in a way I cannot undo." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft rustle of the curtains in the faint breeze. The weight of the curse, the history of his family, and the undeniable pull between them made the room feel smaller, more intimate, and infinitely more dangerous. Aloan swallowed hard. "Then, tell me," she said. "Tell me everything. I want to understand, even if it frightens me." The Duke nodded, as though relieved by her courage. He guided her to a chair by the table and opened the chronicle to a marked page. He read slowly, recounting tales of ancestors who had loved recklessly and suffered endlessly, of bargains made with shadowed forces, and of the promise that each generation would bear the weight of the past. As he spoke, Aloan felt the presence of the house itself, the walls, the floors, the portraits watching them. It was as if the estate had known, all along, that someone like her would one day sit here, listening to the burden of a man who bore too much alone. Hours passed. The conversation shifted from history to personal confession. The Duke revealed moments of his life that few knew. Nights spent wandering the gardens alone, the weight of every decision pressing on him, the loneliness that came with power and isolation. Aloan listened, her heart aching at the depth of his suffering. "You are not like the others," he said finally. "You do not fear me. You do not shy away from what is difficult or dark." "I am not without fear," she admitted. "But fear can teach us more than comfort ever could, and I feel that I must understand you even if it is dangerous." He studied her, and for the first time a small, vulnerable smile touched his lips. "Dangerous," he murmured. "Yes. But sometimes danger is the only path to truth." As evening fell, the gardens outside began to glow with a soft, otherworldly light. Night-blooming flowers opened, their luminescence casting strange patterns across the stone pathways. The Duke walked with her outside, his presence commanding yet gentle. Each step seemed to carry weight, each glance a silent question. "You could leave," he said quietly. "Return to your family, your safety. Few would blame you. Most would think you wise." Aloan shook her head, her hand brushing against the railing. "I cannot. I want to know the man behind the curse. I want to know you." For a long moment he said nothing. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of salt from the distant sea, and the soft glow of the flowers reflected in his dark eyes. Finally he whispered, "Then you are braver than I am." The connection between them deepened, not through words but through shared understanding. She saw the shadows in his eyes, the weight of centuries of isolation, and yet she also saw glimpses of hope, a hope he had long hidden from the world. Suddenly, a faint sound of movement reached their ears. The estate was silent, yet somewhere in the distance, a shadow seemed to shift unnaturally. The Duke's eyes narrowed, the old tension returning. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Tonight you will need to be careful. Not everyone here wishes to see the curse remain dormant." Aloan felt a thrill of fear mixed with determination. She took a step closer, letting him take her hand. The warmth of his touch was comforting, yet it carried an electric edge, as if their bond itself could awaken forces they did not yet understand. A rustle in the bushes interrupted the moment. The Duke moved with lightning precision, pulling her behind a stone pillar just as a shadow passed by, silent and deliberate. Her heart raced. She had glimpsed danger firsthand, and it was unlike anything she had imagined. "Who? What was that?" she whispered. "An intruder," he replied, his grip firm but not harsh. "Or perhaps someone testing us. In this place even shadows have power." Eloin nodded, though the truth of his words sank deep into her heart. The Duke's life was one of constant vigilance, and now she had stepped into that world where every choice was fraught with risk, and every moment could change the course of destiny. As they returned to the house, side by side, the Duke's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "You should know, by staying close, you are not only risking your safety, you are entangling yourself in the threads of this curse. It will test you. It will test us both." Eloin met his gaze steadily. "Then we will face it together." For the first time, the Duke allowed himself to hope, not just for relief from the curse, but for something far rarer. The possibility of connection, of understanding, of love that was not tainted by fear alone. And as night fell over Ashbourne Estate, the shadows seemed to gather closer, whispering promises of danger, longing, and a bond that could not easily be broken. The curse had been revealed, the danger had been felt, and the first threads of trust, and perhaps more, had begun to weave themselves between Lady Eloin and the Duke of Ashbourne. But the night was far from over. And in the darkness, hidden eyes watched, waiting for the first mistake that could unravel everything. Night had fallen over Ashbourne Estate, and the gardens glowed with a pale, otherworldly light. The night-blooming flowers shimmered as though they held small, trapped stars. Their scent was sweet and heavy, filling the air with a strange intoxication. Lady Eloin walked cautiously beside the Duke, her hand brushing against his as they moved along the stone paths. Each step carried a weight, as if the very ground beneath them was aware of the curse that lingered in the house. The Duke's eyes, dark and unreadable, scanned every shadow. "The estate is alive," he said quietly. "Not in the way the living are, but in ways older than any of us. It watches, it remembers, it tests those who enter." Eloin swallowed, feeling a mix of fear and fascination. "And us?" she asked softly. "Is it testing us too?" He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, it tests everything: trust, courage, even love. You must understand, Lady Eloin, the curse is not only mine, it affects anyone who draws near." She looked at him, the glow of the flowers reflecting in her eyes. "Then I will face it," she said firmly. "With you." For a moment he said nothing, only studying her as if weighing her resolve. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter, almost vulnerable. "Few ever do. Fewer still understand what it truly means." The wind rustled through the garden, carrying with it the distant sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs. Shadows moved like living things between the trees, and the moon hung low, casting a silver sheen over the stone statues scattered along the paths. Eloin's heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from the closeness she felt to him, the sense that their lives were now intertwined in ways neither could undo. They stopped near a fountain, its water dark as obsidian. The Duke turned to her, his gaze intense. "There is more I must show you, more than the history of the curse. You must understand its power, its reach." Eloin nodded. "I am ready." He led her deeper into the garden, to a secluded area where the flowers glowed brighter, their light revealing an ancient stone archway. Symbols were etched into the surface, runes she could not read, yet they seemed to pulse with energy. "This," the Duke said, "is a place of testing. Those who come here face what they fear most. The estate will show you visions, temptations, shadows of yourself, and of me." Eloin's breath caught. "Shadows of you," he gave a faint, sad smile. "Yes, the parts I hide, the parts the curse forces me to bear alone." Before she could speak further, a chill swept over the garden. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, and the glow of the flowers flickered. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, moving as if alive. Aloan clutched the Duke's arm instinctively, feeling a strange energy coursing through the air. The first vision appeared. In the water of the fountain she saw herself, not as she was but as someone weak, afraid, turning away from him in the face of danger. She gasped, stepping back, but the Duke's hand held her firmly. "Do not fear what you see," he said. "This is only the estate's way of revealing doubts, insecurities, the things that could tear us apart if we let them." Another vision appeared, this time of the Duke. She saw him alone in a dark hall, shadows clawing at him, whispering promises of power and solitude. His eyes were hollow, filled with loneliness and despair. Her chest tightened, the ache of empathy and longing intertwining. "You see why I cannot love freely," he whispered. "The curse would punish anyone I care for. It has claimed lives before, and it could claim yours." Aloan met his gaze, steady despite the fear creeping into her heart. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes, we face it." He looked at her, astonishment flickering across his face. You do not falter." "Not when it is you," she replied softly. For a moment silence hung between them, thick with tension, longing, and unspoken words. Then the shadows moved again, more urgently. The air grew warmer, and an unnatural firelight flickered across the garden. Figures began to appear, translucent yet menacing, circling them in slow, deliberate steps. The Duke drew her close, his hand at the small of her back. "Stay behind me," he commanded. His voice was firm now, filled with authority, yet not without care. "The estate will not harm you if I can protect you." Aloan's heart pounded as she followed him. Every shadow seemed to reach for them, whispering threats and doubts. And yet, amidst the fear, she felt something stronger, the undeniable bond forming between them, a connection that the curse itself seemed powerless to sever. A figure emerged from the shadows, taller than any human, cloaked in darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly red, and it moved with a grace that was terrifying. The Duke stepped forward, his presence commanding, and the shadow recoiled slightly, as if recognizing his power. "This is not a test you can fail," the Duke said, his voice echoing through the garden. "It will seek your fear, your doubt. Do not let it take you." Aloan swallowed, gripping his hand tightly. She felt a rush of warmth from his touch, a grounding force amid the chaos. "I will not," she said. The shadow lunged, and the Duke moved with fluid precision, deflecting it with gestures that seemed part battle, part dance. The garden became a blur of light and shadow, their movements synchronized in an unspoken rhythm. Aloan followed his lead, dodging, moving, feeling the danger and exhilaration in equal measure. For a moment, she saw him as he truly was, not the aloof, cursed Duke of Ashbourne, but a man burdened and powerful, capable of both immense danger and immense care. And she realized, with a thrill and a pang of fear, how deeply she had come to care for him already. The shadow hissed and recoiled, then vanished into the darkness, leaving the garden eerily quiet. The flowers glowed softly once more, and the air returned to its earlier, gentler chill. The Duke turned to her, his chest heaving slightly. "You did well," he said, his voice quieter now, almost intimate. "Most would have faltered, most would have run." Aloan looked at him, her own breath uneven. I did it because I trust you, I believe in you." A shadow of a smile crossed his face, fleeting and rare. "Then perhaps there is hope for me yet." They walked back to the estate slowly, their hands still intertwined. The night seemed less threatening now, though Aloan knew the estate held many more secrets, many more dangers. And yet, for the first time, she felt a sense of purpose, not just in surviving but in standing beside him, facing the darkness together. Inside, the halls were quiet. Portraits seemed to watch them as they passed, but the weight of the curse felt momentarily lighter, as if acknowledging their courage and unity. In a secluded room, the Duke finally stopped, turning to face her fully. "You must understand," he said softly, "this bond we are forming, it is not without risk. The curse is not gone, it watches, it waits, and it will test us again, harder next time." Aloan nodded. I understand, but I will not step away. Not now, not ever if I can help it. He reached for her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Then, stay close to me, he murmured. His hand lingered near her cheek, gentle but firm, a promise and a warning all at once. A sudden chill swept through the room, and the candle flames flickered violently. Shadows moved unnaturally along the walls, as if the estate itself was reacting to their closeness. Eloan's heart raced. She could feel the danger, the tension, the power swirling around them. And yet she also felt something stronger, a bond that defied the darkness, a connection that could withstand the curse itself. The Duke leaned slightly closer, his voice low. We have faced tonight together, but the true test is still ahead. The estate, it will not release us easily, and neither will fate. Eloan met his gaze, unwavering. Then we will face it together, always. A soft, almost imperceptible wind swept through the room, carrying with it the faintest sound of laughter, or was it a warning? The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, stretching toward them. The Duke's eyes narrowed, dark and intense. Prepare yourself, he said. The next challenge will come soon, and it will demand more than courage. It will demand trust and sacrifice. Eloan swallowed, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew now that she was irrevocably part of his world, part of the curse, part of the shadows that moved through Ashbourne Estate. And she knew, too, that no matter how dangerous, how uncertain, the bond forming between them was worth every risk. As they stood together, hands still clasped, the garden outside glowed faintly in the moonlight, and the estate seemed to breathe, alive with unseen eyes and waiting threats. And deep in her heart, Eloan knew one thing with certainty. This night was only the beginning, and the darkness ahead would test not just their courage, but the strength of the bond that had begun to take root between them. The Duke's voice, soft but filled with unspoken power, lingered in the air. Stay close and do not look away no matter what comes. And with that, the shadows of Ashbourne whispered promises of fire, longing, and trials yet to come. Dawn had not yet broken over Ashbourne Estate. The sky above was a deep, bruised purple, streaked with hints of silver and gold, as the first rays of sunlight threatened to pierce the horizon. Lady Eloan stood at the top of the stone staircase leading into the ruined courtyard. The air was thick with mist, curling around the edges of broken columns and shattered statues. The estate, once grand and proud, now seemed like a liminal world, a place between past and present, shadow and light. She shivered, though it was not cold. It was the weight of anticipation, the knowledge that tonight everything could change. Every choice, every moment of courage or hesitation would determine not only the Duke's fate but their shared future. The Duke of Ashbourne appeared behind her, moving silently, as if the shadows themselves guided him. His dark coat billowed lightly in the wind, and his eyes, sharp and intense, were fixed on the ruins before them. For the first time, Eloan noticed the faint tremor in his hands, the unspoken worry that he carried like a cloak around his heart. "You are ready," he said softly. Eloan turned to him, her own resolve shining through. "I am. I do not fear what comes, not if I am with you." He studied her for a long moment, and for the first time his usual mask of stoicism faltered. A vulnerability flickered across his face, a quiet trust she had earned, and it made his presence feel both comforting and infinitely fragile. "Then we begin," he said. They stepped into the ruined courtyard together. The ground beneath them was uneven, covered in moss and debris. The wind carried faint whispers, as if the estate itself remembered the sins and triumphs of centuries. And somewhere in the shadows the curse awaited, looming, patient, testing their every step. The first trial was immediate. Shadows arose from the broken walls, swirling like black mist, coalescing into forms that seemed almost human, almost alive. They hissed and whispered, voices low and full of malice, echoing in the empty courtyard. "Do not fear them," the Duke warned, drawing closer to her side. "They will attempt to break us, to make us doubt ourselves, each other, everything we feel. Eloin gripped his arm. I will not falter, not now, not ever. The shadows surged forward, but the Duke moved with precise, fluid motions, stepping in front of her, deflecting the dark tendrils with gestures that seemed almost like dancing. Eloin followed his lead, her movements hesitant at first, then more confident as the rhythm of his defense guided her. You are stronger than I expected, he murmured, his breath brushing against her ear. Not many could hold their ground here. Eloin met his gaze briefly. I am not alone. Their connection was a shield against the darkness. Every glance, every touch, every shared breath strengthened their bond and weakened the shadows. Yet the final test awaited, deeper in the ruins, where the source of the curse stirred, waiting for the moment to strike at the heart of their trust. They reached the center of the courtyard, where a shattered fountain marked the spot of the curse's origin. The water, long dried, was replaced by a swirling vortex of shadow and flame. It twisted and writhed, alive with ancient anger, the remnants of every sorrow, every betrayal, every lost soul bound to the Duke's lineage. This is it, the Duke said. His voice was steady, but Eloin saw the strain beneath. The heart of the curse. Whatever happens here will decide everything. The vortex pulsed violently, and a voice, deep, resonant, and filled with centuries of pain, echoed across the ruins. Why do you defy me, Duke of Ashbourne? Why bring another into this web of suffering? I do not defy you out of pride, the Duke replied, stepping closer to Eloin, his hand covering hers. I defy you for her, for us. For the chance to live, to love, and to break the cycle you have bound to me for so long. The vortex roared, and shadows erupted from it like black fire. The Duke's figure was momentarily swallowed, and Eloin felt a chill crawl up her spine, but she did not move back. Instead, she stepped forward, her hand in his, and spoke, her voice firm and unwavering. We are not afraid, she said. We will not be divided, not by fear, not by darkness, not by curses of the past. You cannot claim us, not when we choose to face this together. A silence fell, heavy and tense. The shadows paused as if considering her words, weighing the truth and the courage behind them. The vortex pulsed again, brighter this time, flames licking the edges of the ruins, threatening to engulf them. The Duke drew a deep breath, then moved into the center, guiding Eloin beside him. Then we end this, he said, together. One step, one choice, one truth. He reached out to the vortex, his hand glowing faintly with an ethereal light that seemed to respond to his will. The shadows writhed and hissed, trying to pull him back, trying to strike at the bond they shared. Eloin stepped forward, placing her hand on his. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of warmth and light flowed through them, weaving their courage, their trust, their love into a single unbreakable force. The shadows screamed, twisting violently, but the light between them held. The Duke's eyes met hers, and she saw every fear, every pain, every lonely night reflected there. And then, slowly, the light grew, stronger and brighter, pushing the darkness back, unraveling the curse thread by thread. You can do this, she whispered. I believe in you. We can do this together, he nodded, his hand tightening over hers. Then let it end. A final surge of energy erupted from the vortex, a blinding explosion of shadow and light intertwined. The ruins shook, stones falling, wind howling, yet through it all, they stood side by side, hands clasped, hearts entwined. When the light finally faded, the courtyard was calm. The shadows had vanished, and the remnants of the curse were scattered like ashes in the morning breeze. The Duke lowered his hand, trembling slightly, and looked at Eloin. It is over, he said, awe and relief mixing in his voice. The curse, it is broken. Eloin smiled, though tears pricked her eyes. No, she said softly, it is not over. It is a new beginning for you, for me, for us. He drew her into his arms, a rare, unguarded gesture. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel fully, to trust fully, to hope fully. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. and for the first time, she knew what peace felt like, woven with courage, trust, and the bond that had carried them through darkness. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice low and full of emotion, "for staying, for believing, for choosing me." Aloan lifted her head to meet his gaze. "No thanks needed," she said softly. "We chose this together, and together we are stronger than any shadow." The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, illuminating the ruins with gold and silver. The estate, once haunted by centuries of sorrow, seemed to breathe anew. The wind carried away the last remnants of darkness, leaving only the promise of life, love, and redemption. The Duke held her hand as they walked through the courtyard, side by side, no words necessary. Every glance, every touch spoke of trust, of understanding, of a bond forged in fire and shadow, now tempered in light. Yet as they reached the edge of the estate, a distant shadow stirred, not of malice, but of the unknown. The world outside Ashbourne was vast, full of mystery and challenges yet to come. But they faced it together, unafraid, knowing that whatever darkness waited, they would confront it as one. The Duchess's words from that night at the ball echoed in Aloan's mind. Stay close to him, and now she understood. To stay close was not merely to be near, but to face fear, to share courage, and to weave hearts together in a bond that neither time nor curse could unravel. The Duke's hand tightened around hers, and he looked down at her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Aloan," he said, "we have faced the curse, and yet I feel as though we have just begun. With you the shadows hold no power over me. Together there is nothing we cannot face." Aloan smiled, her heart full. "Then we step forward together, always." And with the first true light of morning washing over Ashbourne Estate, they walked forward side by side into a future that was no longer shadowed by fear, but bright with hope, trust, and love. A love forged in darkness, strengthened in danger, and redeemed in the ashes of the past. The wind carried the scent of flowers, the distant roar of the sea, and the quiet promise of a world reborn. Ashbourne was no longer a place of sorrow and curse. It was a home, a sanctuary, a beginning. And in that beginning, two hearts beat as one, ready to face whatever dawn might bring.